Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I'm Kim Crumbly.
I'm Laura Rancourt.
Together we are Counselor Accents. What's happening with you, friend? You're still at your work is over, but yet there you are. I think you hide at work.
I avoid my family.
There you go. I don't blame you. I've met them and I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I don't blame you, but you look super cool. You look super good.
Thank you. It's these sparkly earrings.
It is. That's what I love. Tribute to Dolly. Tribute to Dolly right there.
That and my high hair, which I can't help but notice that your hair, hear my heart, it's been sizzling lately. Your hair is
and I thank you for noticing, and that is my love language. When you criticize me, that means hey, I love you.
Likewise.
And yes, because I have I'm long hauler now. I'm a long hauler with the COVID. And so I have actually made my second appointment to go back to my doctor because I still have the rawness right here. And I know I'm a hypochondriac. I get it. But I have all the rawness here and I am could sleep at any moment. That's new for me. Like I could get up on this table right now and go to sleep. So those of you who are listening, who are long haulers, and I know, I'm not making light because there are some who are really hauling it. But my husband, everything is fine with him until about after he recovered from COVID. He cannot stand the smell of hairspray. I live off hairspray. I drink hairspray.
Yeah.
He may be lying. I don't know, but he is using what is these glands called? Glands now cannot handle the
olfactory.
Oh,
is that it?
Good. I think it is. Do you know that because of your roaming tongue disease? Is that connected to the olfactory? I don't know.
Maybe.
So yes, all that's messed up. So he smells everything now. Everything.
He can't handle the smell of hairspray.
No, and he can stink to high heaven and I have to put up with it, but everything stinks now to him, everything. So
well, remind me not to come within 20 feet.
You would kill him. I got an EpiPen ready for when you are anywhere around him with your hairspray.
Because it is like, it seeps out of my pores. I've used hairspray. The hole in the ozone layer is because of me. I'm sorry to society.
Right here. Right there. You are the hole in the ozone layer. Do you know that I have lived in the country my entire life, lived in the country, Alabama, rural, and I did not know that farmers who have cattle have to pay a gas tax.
I didn't know that. Like we're talking that kind of gas.
They have to pay a gas tax. So you didn't know it either.
No, I didn't.
Well, that makes me feel better. But I am surrounded by cattle.
Yeah.
We don't have them, but neighbors do, and they have to pay a gas tax. And I do mean that. I know. When you talked about the ozone layer, that's
where your mind went.
Well, it is because it is affecting. Is it the ozone layer that affects the gas tax? I don't know.
Let's stick to school counseling, something we know a little bit more about.
I just find that very intriguing. And I really thought that you are such a middle schooler. Sometimes I thought you'd fall out laughing when I said that, but you took it. You took it well. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
For the maturity that you have shown.
Thank you. So that is not the way that you normally speak to me. You don't normally give me compliments.
It took your breath away.
It made me speechless for a second. And it's the opposite of what our guest is talking about today. The whole reason I brought our guest on, I can tell that like you're already influenced by our guest. So we have brought on I'm going to say a specialist I don't want to say she's a specialist in relational aggression because that makes it sound like she's the mean girl, and she's not. She just knows what to do with relational aggression, which go ahead.
She has asked that we not use the term relational aggression.
That is news to me. It's outdated. It was news to me whenever.
It was news to me too. And so I don't know. That's going to be a hard one. I mean, I was saying guidance counselor up until.
Carol, after your mouth. Thank you, Carol.
It takes a long time for a teacher old dog new tricks. So yes, this is not. She wants us to call it something else. So the interesting thing about her is that she works. Will you tell a lot of the interesting things about her? But this is
yes. So the movie Mean Girls, which was written and directed and produced and acted in and all the things by Tina Fey, was inspired by the book Queen Bees and Wannabes. Well, the author of that book started this company. And so the person that we have on our podcast today, Carey Goldstein, is she works for that company. She works with the author of the book. So that's who we're going to be hearing from. So I'm ready to dive in. Let's go. I'm Laura Rankhorn.
And I'm Kim Crumbly. And together we are Counselor Accents. And I am in my vehicle pulled over somewhere outside Atlanta and coming back from a meeting in South Carolina, Savannah. And I told Laura, you said, I've got this one.
I can do it by myself. In fact, I'd love to do it by myself. Please let me do this by myself. And you said,
and I said, absolutely not. So I have actually been pulled over because I was afraid I'd get in traffic. So I've been pulled over about an hour, but I did get a Brewster's ice cream then still couldn't get on. And so I'm on my phone. So I apologize to our guests for that, but we are so excited. We're so excited, Laura. This is going to be a great one.
This is one that we've talked about for a long time, and we have made it happen. In fact, Carey, you and I were just talking, and I said you were so gracious before whenever we had to cancel at the last minute, like we do have to do sometimes, because, who knows, at any given podcast moment, we may be under a table with a student, or and this is we do these after school, but still, sometimes you're under the table with a student after school. But anyway,
for many hours. Yeah.
Yes. So we have Carey Goldstein with us, and Carey, you have quite an impressive bio. Right now you work with Cultures of Dignity, where that's what you're going to be talking about with us today, your role there. And you've done it all. It seems like you've been a middle school counselor, a high school counselor, you're a mom. So tell us and our listeners a little bit about you, and then we're going to get going, diving into some of our questions.
Okay, great. Yes, I am, have been and am all of those things. I worked at a school for 15 years. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's a K through 12 here, a private school here. And my children go there. And when my oldest became a freshman, we decided that she perhaps needed a little space from her mom, who knew way too much. My joke with her was, girl, I know who took the vodka to the party and who threw up in the Uber and who did what every Monday morning. I said, I don't need to be, let's let your mistakes come home and not through school. And we'll talk about it that way. So it was really hard to leave. I loved the school environment and I cried, but it was the right thing for our family to do, to give her that space. And then Cultures of Dignity, Rosalind Wiseman, who is the co-founder with Charlie Kuhn, she had written a book called Masterminds and Wingmen years ago. And I had already been using her curriculum, Owning Up and those things. And she used some of our students, and she would come in to Louisville to meet with them. And I would be in charge of taking her around, and we professionally just really clicked. It helps that I'm in Kentucky and she likes good bourbon and good food. So that definitely helped the relationship. So I was already consulting for them a little bit, and I was editing and looking at lessons. I was doing a few trainings here and there where I would go to a school and work with them. And then I always have to be clear, I did not quit to go work for them, but they were ready for someone to come work for them when I was quitting. So it was a good fit. So I've been with them in earnest for about 4 years, but I probably got trained in the curriculum myself 15 plus years ago. It was one of the few curriculums that I found when I was a middle school counselor that really resonated with the kids and that they responded to. So that's how I started working with that. And then since then, I love it. I get to go to schools and consult and talk with them. And I love schools. You know, when you work at a school, you're kind of fascinated by how everybody does things differently or the same, and kids are the same no matter where you are. And so it's been a really good transition for me. And I really enjoy it. We're a really small group and I really love it. It's like a family and it's been great.
How exciting. So for our listeners, the name Rosalind Wiseman might ring a bell because she is the author of a book that, Kim, you kept close to you, and took it around and touted it as sort of your school counseling Bible for a while. But she's the author of Queen Bees and Wannabes. Mm-hmm. And so Kim, I know that book was very instrumental in your school counseling life.
Absolutely. I have asked every parent to read the book who has girls of a certain age, or even if they're, they know they're going to. I want them to be prepared and not hit from behind on how sometimes we get into these situations and with our, and I know let me finish what I was going to say about the book. A fellow teacher at my school, I was the school counselor. She gave me the book and I read it, and it just was finally the thing that I felt like matched my need. The book matched the need and what I was actually seeing in students. But now I want to say relational aggression, and Laura tells me that we're going to change the wordage of that. We're very excited because we really have always called it relational aggression. So I want our listeners to know that's kind of what we're talking about, but we're not calling it that anymore. Tell us what we're calling that and why.
Well, I don't necessarily have a replacement phrase, but we really talk about the idea of relational aggression is really just about people being in conflict. And that's where our students are. Conflict is inevitable. We all experience conflict. And at the age that we're talking about it, these are social emotional skills that kids don't have. They don't know how to handle conflict. And so sometimes that comes off as, yes, aggression towards another person in a way that we really wish they wouldn't. And kids are trying out those different personalities. They're seeing what works. And if they get a good response, okay, I might stick with that for a little bit when that one felt good. And I got a little positive feedback, or not even positive feedback, but whatever I wanted to happen happened. And I don't really care about how I got there. It just happened. So we call ourselves a principles-based company. We have principles that we use in all of our work. And one of them is conflict is inevitable and collaboration is essential. But the first part about that of conflict is inevitable is what we base a lot of our curriculum and our things on, is that it is inevitable, and it's not bad that it happens, but how do we work through it? And how do we manage it? How do we apologize on the other side when we mess up, even if we think we know how to handle conflict? And so, yeah, we look at it as just a process of kids, young people working through conflict that don't have the skills yet. And that's what we're here to help them work through.
So I can hear counselors all over the United States saying, what do we do with this conflict? And we know that generally this is girls. And it kind of, if you've watched the movie Mean Girls, it's kind of along the lines of what causes this, I don't know, this mentality that causes this conflict. And boys can be involved in it too. And I've had boys involved in it, but not to the extent that I have had girls involved. And it is, let me say, one of the hardest things I think school counselors can break up. I think we try everything, and it's so hard to break it up. So I don't know if there's a question there other than to say, what do you think is behind this conflict among girls of a certain, that begins at a certain age and can go through middle school and even into high school sometimes?
Adulthood, yeah. There was a second book called
right.
Queen Bee Moms and Kingpin Dads. Yeah, it can go on into adulthood. Well, I do laugh. I have a senior and a sophomore, 18 and almost 16-year-old. And my 18-year-old came home from school the other day and she's like, oh, the boys, they're so dramatic and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, we kind of let them think that they're not involved and not as dramatic, but boys tend to drop these little bombs, and then walk away and watch the girls spin around it. So while they may not be showing it as much outwardly, they are definitely either often instigating. I mean, I just would laugh. I'd see this boy come up and who told you that? Well, my guy friend told me that. And then the whole thing unravels as they go through. So why it is, yes, girls tend to live in it longer. I think just because they are allowed to show their emotions longer, and it is in some ways expected of them, unfortunately. We try to flip the script a little bit on respect and dignity. One of our other principles is that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone has the same amount, no one's better or worse. It's inherent. And respect, we don't hate the word at all. It's on the walls of schools across the country, and it should be, but we try to pull out what these words are and what they mean, because respect really means to look back at, to look at someone's actions, from the Latin roots, whereas dignity means to be worthy. And what happens oftentimes with respect, when we use those words in school, like let's say two girls starting in, upper elementary or wherever it is, have a conflict, we'll tell kids things like, you don't have to be nice, but you have to respect them. And that can be really confusing for kids to say, but wait, they just sat with their back to me the entire lunch period. And then they talked about me in front of my friends and all these other things, and I have to respect them. Hold on a minute. Like, those actions don't feel worthy of my respect. Treating with dignity means you kind of don't have to respect their actions and maybe them, but you don't get to seek revenge. You don't get to talk bad about them behind their back. You don't, they're still a human. So you have to treat them with that inherent worth, but it helps pull out the actions from the person for kids sometimes. And going a little deeper with respect, it often can mean, especially for kids that are marginalized in our schools that maybe aren't heard or seen a different way at times, respect can really mean obey. It becomes a power struggle between adults and kids at times with, you will respect me. Now, we're not talking about necessarily that today. We're talking more about the relationship between kids. So sometimes pulling out those words help them understand the difference a little bit, so that when you have a conversation with them about the conflict that's going on, it's helpful for them. We also take that piece. We do have in the Owning Up curriculum what we call SEAL. And it's an acronym, which I used to laugh because my goal in life was not to be the cheesy counselor. When I was a school counselor, I was like, I don't want to be the lady that people are making fun of because I talk about, and there's nothing wrong when they're little, but like warm fuzzies and cold pricklies when they're 17, I don't want to be doing that. And so oftentimes I wouldn't necessarily use the acronym because I knew my 8th graders would roll their eyes, or, you could kind of use it in 6th grade. But basically SEAL is a process that you go through when you're in conflict. And we tell kids that it's also about practice. It's not about perfection. So if they do any part of SEAL, which I'll explain what those 4 are in a moment, they're winning, they're improving. So the first one is stop. Is this the right time and place to confront the person that I want to confront? If you walk up to a table full of kids and you want to, get your point across to one person, they did something you didn't like, that's probably not the best place to do it. You're going to get some stickers. You're going to get people saying, why are you so uptight? All of those things that we say, why do you care? So maybe that moment isn't the time and place. So that's the first one. I always joke with kids. I'm like, if you can just stop, you're winning that day. E is for explain, explaining specifically what you don't like. It really hurt my feelings, or I really didn't like that you told Susie the secret. I thought I could trust you with my secrets. The A is affirm and acknowledge. Kind of reaffirming what you said, but then also acknowledging, I'm sorry. Sometimes you may not know what you did. So part of it is there something that I did that made you want to do that? Or owning that, and I know I told your secret a month ago, and now I know how that feels. Let's maybe agree to not do that again, kind of getting there, but acknowledging if there's any part that you had. I joke when I work with adults sometimes of like, it's kind of like a marriage or a relationship or a roommate. You have to own that there might be something you may have done also in that moment. And then the L is for lock in, lock out, or take a break. That can sometimes be a little bit more confusing for younger kids that don't, sometimes I think locking out means I get to ignore you completely and not talk to you. So you really have to work with them on what that looks like. But I worked a lot of times with high school kids on what does it look like to gently pull away from a friendship that's not healthy. And locking it out doesn't, taking a break doesn't mean locking out forever. We also use the example of Velcro sometimes. Sometimes you pull it apart and put it together, it sticks a little differently. It might look a little different the next time you put it together. And so going through those steps with kids at least helps them address the conflict on their end, on what they're doing and what they can kind of control. Now, kids look at you like, you expect me to do what? So a lot of times we'll walk through the steps as a group, and I'll let them tell me what won't work about that. Sometimes if I would do seal and I could tell like they roll their eyes, I'd be like, okay, what do you hate about it? Tell me what you hate about it. And then sometimes through the process, they'd end up being like, okay, maybe that would work. Maybe I shouldn't have said it in front of his 3 best friends, because then they all defended him and it became a bigger deal. Maybe I shouldn't have been responding to that text with my 2 friends behind me telling me what to say. Maybe that wasn't the right place to do that. And so getting them through that process, we also talk a little bit about social emotional learning. We try to relate it to, this was one of our, I should have said this very beginning. We also have young people advise us on everything we do. So we have an editorial advisory council, and they're kids from all over the world. We have a couple kids in Ghana, a couple kids in South America, and then a lot in the States. And so they read and edit all that we do. So that, I think that does help with buy-in and why these lessons resonate with kids often. But one of the kids one day was like, what about if you relate it to Fortnite? When, I don't know how popular Fortnite still is, but when it was all the rage for, that year or two, that, you're not good the first time you play. You're not an expert getting to level whatever. And again, I know nothing about it. My girls didn't play it a lot, so I'm probably using the wrong terminology. But you're not, Pac-Man would be what I could refer to, but you're not on level 20 the first day. You don't understand how it works. You're still figuring out which things to use on the console and things like that. So that's what social emotional learning also is. And that's what handling conflict is. I am still not an expert at it. I'm working on it. I have one family member that if he knew how often I threw him under the bus, would probably be upset, but my brother and I are really, really opposite. And for a long time, we would be in conflict and I would get teary and red faced and not want to talk anymore because we were so different. And I have learned to use some of these techniques a little bit, like stop, are you getting fired up? Because I would tend to get fired up a little quickly. And then I would kind of explain, and I've also started using questions like, tell me why that's important to you. Tell me why that means something to you. And that gives me a minute to listen and think. And that's what I also tell kids. You have to be ready to listen to the other side and accept a little bit of what you did. I also would use the phrase sometimes, what are they going to tell me? If I go check in with them right now, what would they say? What would I be surprised by? What are you leaving out? I'm going to stop for a second to make sure that like I said, I tend to ramble a little bit. So I hope that's making sense.
It is. It's great.
It does. I like those practical. You can start now using these things. So yes, it does make sense. So I love those. Those are practical things. And even as adults, we can use, and that's, when you put it in the acronym for us. And so those are practical things that I think we can use. When we talk about conflict, and correct me and help me, because I want to grow in this, I'm thinking of more equitable, and so much of what I deal with is the, I don't know if it's endorphins. Let's just say we have we'll call her Jill, and Jill gets a high out of gathering her posse. Mm-hmm. And, so and if you don't go along with that, then you're going to be on the outs. And so dealing with a lot of that, and I love what you said about the Velcro, because a lot of frenemies, we deal with a lot of, they want so desperately to be the main, the queen. They want to be so desperately to be in, but they'll put up with stuff that they shouldn't be putting up with. So am I right in thinking that there is some kind of high that you get when you are, I don't know, what am I saying?
It totally does, because sometimes you can't imagine, like, really, what do you get out of this? I'm not a scientist, so I'm not 100% sure if they're getting endorphins. Yeah. But I do think they get what they want, whether they get it begrudgingly or not. And I do think sometimes there's a pattern of the power that I'm gaining in whatever way I'm gaining it by any means necessary. I mean, we've also seen those kids that are really, we hate to use the word popular a little bit, but that are really well liked by all groups because they're actually nice.
Yeah.
And that you kind of like, why can't we all follow that? But that doesn't always seem to work. But I do think there has to be that the change in the dynamics of the friend group, which is a little bit harder to infiltrate because it's a fear. And that's when kids also act out when they socially feel unsafe. That's when they tend to act out in not their best behavior. I used to do the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I would put it up because they would talk about like when there'd be a flood, they'd say, well, why would people loot their own neighborhood? And I would kind of put it up there and I'd say, well, when these needs aren't met, you do things you would steal, which you never would normally steal, but you're so worried about your safety and your belonging and all those things. And I had one class one year that was they were so fun. They talked about everything. And we talked about how, kids could be social looters, like they were socially looting because they would do things that they know were wrong, but they would turn around and do them to a good friend, even though it felt bad and they can't necessarily understand why. And some of it, I mean, honestly, is just brain development, that like, they don't remember 2 seconds later, kind of how mean they were or what they did wrong. All they know is that they still get to be sort of the leader right now. And they're willing to flush it out. So I always say also, it's not, when I was at my last high school, there'd be conversations around, we do all these things and, we do character education and we're doing advisory and we have to remember the goal a little bit is not to create, and this was a little bit more discipline than friendship, but not to create those robots. Kids are going to make mistakes, but how do we kind of shepherd them through it? And also the other side, when you look at friendships like that, how do we tap into that, to Jill's kind side? How do we remind her that that's okay and that's in there? How do we encourage her friends to do that? And also part of that is part of that is standing up in those moments when they that feel a little bit safer. And what do those look like? I would also encourage kids when you're talking to them about standing up, we tend to put words in their mouths and say, oh, you should say, and then I would always say, now, how would you really say it? What would it really sound like in your words? And also if you ever do the seal and they give you a scenario and they tell you that they would hold hands and skip down the hallway and be best friends, I'm like, okay, yeah. That's what you think I want to hear. What would that really look like? And you have to really push them to be honest about it. And sometimes the big group discussion is better first. In particular, if there's a click, again, these words that, we've been around forever, but still work. Yeah. If there's a group of friends that are really struggling, causing issues, that power dynamic is there, talking about it in a group a little bit away from them as in it exists and it's out there. How does that now also affect you all? And then also I let them lead the conversation. Us telling them like, did you guys know there's peer pressure and this is how it works and this is what it looks like? They have stopped talking to you and stopped listening because they think that you are old and have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. So to say to them, I did it with dating one time and I learned so much that there's this whole thing that you're talking first and then you have a thing and then you're dating and then your boyfriend, girlfriend, and then maybe you're official. I was like, wow, there's so many steps that I had no idea existed. So asking them, I would tease and say, okay, I'm the old lady in the room. How does it look like when friendships fight? Tell me what that looks like and let them kind of talk about it a little bit. Be like, okay, well, how does that feel? And how can we counterbalance that? But letting them lead that conversation really helps. Because first of all, they don't get to be the experts in their own lives often. And again, that's one of our principles is young people are the experts in their own lives. And in particular, even if we thought we could relate before the pandemic, we couldn't because technology is so different now. And now with the pandemic, we have no idea what it's like to be a young person right now at all. So leading with that and letting them lead the conversation can also help. I used to like to do the big picture and then narrow it down a little bit. Okay, how can we help you next time you have an argument? Not that you're having one now, of course, but next time.
Yeah, I think you were an amazing counselor.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, just listening to you just roll these off. So,
well, and the owning up curriculum, and I'm not trying to just say like sell. But the Own Up curriculum was really helpful because what it really is student centered as far as student led, where a lot of the activities are, again, they are a little bit away. Like we just did one the other night. I was showing one about bystanding, which we rarely use that word. We call a lot of things watered down words. If you say them too often, we never use the word bullying in the curriculum, except for one time when we let kids define what it means, because that's just a word they roll their eyes. We're going to have a bullying lesson today. I mean, they're not listening to you. So, but we do this whole thing about, there's a video about bystanding where the guy's trying to put up a tent, and the more people in the room, the less likely, or the longer it takes to help him. And then when there's one person in the room, it only took about 8 seconds. But when there were 15, it took 12 minutes. And so you can, and it's older people. So you can say like, look, this is how kind of bystanding works. And then you can relate it to a friendship. And then they're like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one that maybe I don't want to stand up, or, okay, maybe that happens all the time. Or look, those are older people. And it's, so a lot of those things in the curriculum are like, let's look at this from a distance a little bit. Now tell me what you thought about that video. Now let's slide it into you a little bit more, and letting them lead the conversation, and then also trying to have some fun with them, letting them debate some things. And some days just give up and play a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting, and something I definitely want to look into, because it sounds like Laura and I've had conversations very recently about giving students more voice into what we do and our data and what we're looking at.
Oh, great. I think you get the buy-in instantly. I mean, when you give them an opportunity, and again, if you think about the ages we're talking about, they don't get that very often. And one of the things that I love to show, and I had up in my room, it's funny because we all train differently, but it's one of the slides I always like to keep in, but I think I'm the only one. But it really helps teachers, because a lot of times we're talking to teachers about how to do social emotional learning, which teachers know they want to do it and they know it's important, but sometimes because they're used to being sort of the masters of their domain, the loosey-goosiness a little bit can stress them out. And so it's a continuum. And on one side, it has students as objects. In the middle, it's students as recipients. And then the last side is students as resources. I think it actually says young people, but there's a time and place for students to be objects. If it's a fire drill, get in line, get your rear end outside. We need to count you. It's a safety issue. Recipients we think of as more in the classroom. I'm teaching math or English or whatever it is, and we're having a back and forth conversation. I'm asking questions, you're participating, those things. And then young people as resources is more of that kind of, whatever you call it, advisory time, character class time, life skill, whatever the name you have for that. So I think that helps teachers see that we're not asking them to give up their classroom into chaos and those things. You've got a lot of kids in a building. You can't just let it be student run completely, but it shows them like there's different hats. And also it really helped with kids. I used to have kids why do I have to be quiet during a fire drill? Well, let me tell you why, but here's other times where you don't have to be quiet. And here's other times where you actually get to speak up, and, student senate, all these other places, giving them an opportunity to be the resource is really helpful for them. So that visual used to help both my students understand why they have to, be quiet during the fire drill. And also you have teachers like, oh, you're not asking me to relinquish anything. You're asking me to wear different hats, essentially, a little bit at different times.
I like the idea of the chart, the visual, so that students can see what you're talking about, the why behind the what. I think that's important to get the buy-in, like what you were talking about.
Yeah, it can help.
I'd like to dive into social media and how that has intensified what was formerly known as relational aggression. And just these,
the artist formerly known as Fred.
Exactly.
So what have you seen? And let's just start there. Like, what have you seen?
Gosh, I was going to joke and say, can we not talk about social media? No, I'm just
sorry.
Kidding. No, it's just so all encompassing. And I have to say, even as a parent, it's been really stressful because the increased dependency on it through the pandemic, and you feel bad, and now we're coming out of it on the other side a little bit where they're more interactive, but I still see my kids, the one thing recently we're like, you can't walk and look at your phone. That's a new rule in the house. You're going to hurt yourself. So it is hard. I mean, but I do think if you look at it through the lens of dignity, the same rules apply. You don't get to take away someone's dignity just because it's online. We do have a couple of lessons about technology. And again, that's another place to start off gently and talk about, what do you love about technology? Even the adults in the room. I admit that I play Candy Crush sometimes, because sometimes it's been a long day and I want 20 minutes to not think about anything other than popping a bubble or whatever it is, so telling kids things like that, like, I like Instagram to see my college friends' kids. What do you not like about it? Sometimes my 20 minutes of Candy Crush is not just 20 minutes, and having to admit that. And so they like to see us admit it, because so often when we're talking about social media and technology, we demonize it and we talk about how bad it is and how bad it is for your brain. All of those can also be true. And there's also some really cool things about it, things that we couldn't do before, things that we can look up, things that we can find. And again, that's another place to come in. Like, I'm the old lady in the room. Tell me how you use technology. What does it look like to you? Where do you wish you would change it? And then it's a better conversation around, how do we change it? I ran into a parent the other day and we were talking about technology and, just same kind of thing, frustrated. Sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do. As the parent, you're like, I can tell you this as a school counselor, but maybe I'm not following completely through. But with the technology thing, I do think we become a little hypocritical at times. The don't use at the dinner table, but we're going to check our work email, or don't, you shouldn't be on. We used to try to get them not to do two things at once. You can either watch TV or be on your phone, but don't do both yet. Again, checking, sometimes I'll be scrolling through my work email. Let me clear some things off my calendar for tomorrow. So I do think that's one important thing in particular for parents to, even for teachers sometimes, teachers are now probably checking their phones a little bit more often when kids are in class. There has been a shift. I think there's a little bit more anxiety that we all have around not having it near us. So I think I don't have a magic bullet for social media, because I think we all have different relationships with it. I do think talking about that relationship and acknowledging both sides of it is helpful. And then maybe even challenging, change one thing. I also get really frustrated when people say, we're going to change these 4 things about how we use social media. No, you're not. And then you feel like a failure and everyone's upset. I couldn't even do. We're going to pick one thing to pick. And I'm huge on that. If you're trying to get a kid to change anything, even the girls that are not being as kind as they could, pick one thing to work on, because we give them lists and we have these expectations that they're going to do these things that we are not even good at, or the adults in the building aren't good at. So yeah, have them, I'll put it away an hour before bed. That's huge if you can get them to do that. Or, that's also a little hard to do with parents because you're not in control of that, but get them to pick one thing that they're willing to work on or give up. And then the meanness on social media, I go back to dignity doesn't stop just face to face. It should be carried throughout whether it's on social media, that's still you're still representing yourself. And then in some ways I'd remind people, it's also like much easier to capture. I would tease other girls. I was like, if you say it to someone, I don't know who's telling the truth. If you say yes and she said no, I'm not sure who did. So I'm not, but if you write it down and someone brings a screenshot, I'm pretty sure I know what you did online. Now that is, I would say that's kind of the back end, because you don't want to start off with that scare tactic. Rosalind actually was huge on this a couple of years ago about, why are we telling kids if they make one mistake online, their life is over? Think about the pressure that we're putting on them. And how stressful that is to think about. Like, you do one thing and then they do one thing wrong. Are they going to tell you or talk through it or work? They're going to, deny and deflect, and the parents are panicking because they're not going to get into college, where all of that really isn't necessarily true. Yes, there's some extreme cases where it might affect a college entrance or something, but we're stressing kids out to the point where we can't learn from it because no one can admit it, because they're fearing the consequences too severe. So working through that with them a little bit of, yes, colleges might peruse your Instagram or whatever it is. So do you want to have a bunch of pictures of you with the red Solo cup? They know what that is. They know what that means. No. Is it necessarily going to deny your college entrance? No, but if they're deciding between 2 people somewhat equally, maybe, but not making it so dire, not making it that your life is ending. Because again, you're choke holding the ability to talk about it later.
Yeah, makes sense. I know, when you're talking about the social media, there's a lot of, it's the same thing in the respect of, it's so hard it's so hard to deal with for counselors is the social media and the conflict with that queen bee conflict kind of thing. Those are so hard to conquer, I guess, because it's almost like there's a disconnect and not a reality. And I like the seal. I like the giving talking points, giving some meat to something for counselors to say. And I'll just throw this out here, and I guess it's just because I was a high school counselor saying this, and you guys can tell me what you think about this. But I always tell, when I call a parent to discuss it about their child, I always say, they're moving on from me. I'm not doing this because a lot of times they, and this is work. A lot of times parents feel like there's no way that my child is the person that's saying these things. And I always say, they're going to move on from me. You are going to have that high schooler, and I've been on the other end. And that, if we can't control it at the elementary or maybe even the middle school, and that seems to, once they realize I'm not in it they're moving on from me. You're going to have this person, and how can you help me, acknowledge that this is a problem, whether it's on social media or, but you're right, on social media, you actually can catch them. I mean, you can say, no, this is you.
Right.
And you are, a gang of you have gathered, and you're flipping off and sending it to another student in the school. And for what reason, we don't know.
Right.
These are things that happen.
Yeah.
So I know there's not another question in that. It's just that discussing it as counselors, how do you get parents to realize this is an issue, and how can we address this together? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, I mean, there's so many of these tips with school counseling. I'm like, I would be a millionaire if I could fix these things so easily and write a book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because you're dealing with people, and I had one head of middle school. He'd be like, how can we be more proactive? And I would always say, we can instill, these programs and have these classes, but you're dealing with a million different personalities, perspectives, baggage from their own upbringing with parents and how they're being raised at home and all these things. So you can only be so proactive. But I do, one of the things I was thinking about this today, because I was kind of relooking at some of the questions just to refresh my brain a little bit. And I remember in particular, we had a class of students, and they were just a lot of strong personalities, parents wise. And I think I look back and it was a lot of onlys and firstborns, so there might've been a little bit more anxiety on the parent side. And I remember I would sometimes avoid, or I would put off the phone call I needed to make home because I knew it would, I'm like, I should really check in on that parent, but whoops, I'll do it tomorrow. My day is instantly,
absolutely.
And what I did is I ended up putting a sticky on my desk with a couple of parents' names, and I would call them and just check in a little bit, because their kids were actually having a hard time trying to remember that human side of it, of they're stressed and they're panicking, and it's not showing their best side. And me avoiding it and just kind of pushing it off a couple of days and letting them stew in it is just letting them stew in it. So I would try to be proactively calling them, again, as proactive as you can. And I really had one parent come back later and be like, thank you. I kind of needed that check in. And it honestly saved me time.
Yeah.
Because I was making the phone call before another situation kind of came about. Now you can't do that with every scenario, but I do think heading it on, and I think my role, I always looked at, I would leave meetings sometimes with a head of school that would say, or a principal or a teacher would say, well, they're just crazy, or they're just this. And I would always try to pause in that moment and say, yes, they may have been acting a little crazy in this moment, but they are not crazy. They're either scared, they're hurt, they're angry at their child, but don't know, there's a lot of other emotions going on that we perhaps don't know what they are. And so I looked at my role as just the listening. Let me listen to the parent, let them kind of vent. And then, some of the best parent scenarios were when you could push back gently, the parent really would respect that. But you are right, Kim, it's hard. It depends on the relationship with the parent. Some will be blindly one way. I also laugh, like, because I work at a school, my kid's always wrong. I'm like, what did you do? Like my kids are like, can't you take my side once? I'm like, no, you did something. I don't know what it was, but I'm trying to find small ways to partner.
I think that's great. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying is right on. Get to be proactive, like you're saying, and maybe have conversations past that, like, how's it going? And once they realize you've nothing to gain by, accusing their child wrongly, you're just there to help them. But it does take that. I think that's wonderful what you're saying. And it's good for us to remember as school counselors to use that relationship building tools and listen to the parents. And usually when we do listen, we get a lot, and we listen with an empathetic ear. We really get to the bottom of what's bothering them, and probably, like you're saying, their fears too. Whether they're admitting that or not.
Well, you made me just think of something, and I know I'm saying we're not doing a principles podcast, but again, we do have these principles that we use often, and they have really honestly helped me tremendously. And one of them is, listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. And I always clarify that with, it doesn't mean changing your opinion, but it could change your understanding of where that parent is coming from. So even the child also, like you may not suddenly say, okay, you're right, I should let your child get away with this because they're having a hard time. But you might gain insight into the parent is sick. Mm-hmm. And they're not feeling present. And so they're trying to, they're feeling like they're pulled in different ways and they're trying to overcompensate or something, but it just gives you an understanding maybe of what's going on, that listening piece. And when we're trying to rush through it because we're just trying to check it off and say, yeah, I checked in with them. Yep. I checked in with that parent today. We're not really being that kind of authentic listener. And I also like what you said about, remember, I'm on your kid's side. Yeah. I'm actually the person, the advocate for them here more than anyone, else. So, yeah.
Well, and that makes me think, Kim and I have said a lot of times that we are the counselor. We're not the administrator. The administrator is there for a reason, and the counselor, we are there for a reason. And so when you bring that other perspective in, like, hey guys, let me just shed a little light, not breaching confidentiality, of course, but just letting them know that, Kim and I always say everybody has a story. And when we know that person's story, sometimes it brings some compassion into the room where maybe there wasn't before. And absolutely. So I think what you're saying just really drives home that point that you're the counselor, you're there for a reason. No better way to advocate for the child than to go straight to the parent and figure out the whole story, what's really going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And parenting isn't easy.
No.
I mean, let's be clear, and for some people, the social emotional skills come a little bit more naturally. And I had a parent one time, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, talked about how parenting was so out of her. She was this big executive at a corporation here. And she said, parenting is just really hard for me. I don't understand a lot of these different nuances. And I thought, wow, I think I might've been judging her more. I try not to, but I think in my head, I was like, why can't she kind of figure this out? And when she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, she's working as hard as she can, just those gentle reminders sometimes, because we can get caught up in thinking like, what is wrong with them? Why don't they? Yeah. But yeah. And I also tell parents too, we have to know the whole story, not the whole story. Obviously they can keep their privacy to a degree, but if I don't know grandma's sick, I don't know how to help or to understand if Jill is lashing out because mom's been, out of town for 2 months taking care of grandma, so it really helps. I think I encourage parents to give the counselor information. And so then that way, if something happens, and I used to always ask, what are you comfortable with me sharing? Right. Who do you want to know? And what are you comfortable with me telling them to what degree? Because in high school, some of the situations can be pretty intense. Yeah. So you have to be careful of what you share, but asking permission first, which teachers, who can I talk to? Who is your child's adult? Who's your ally? Who's the person for them to go find? Can I let them know? So those types of things. Also, can I let your child know I know? Because sometimes parents tell you things and they don't tell their kid they called. And I'm like, oh gosh, you need to make sure I know that we all know what's going on. Yeah.
That's good. That is very good. I know our time is getting short. This is just absolutely flown by. And I've got quite a drive home, but I want us to say anything else that, Laura, was there anything else we really wanted to make sure that we addressed?
Well, I know we've talked about the Owning Up curriculum. What other resources would you suggest for counselors?
Well, I saw that question. I was laughing a little. I was like, well, I love her resources, of course. But yes, the Owning Up curriculum. And when we do have these things called tiny guides, and they are exactly what they sound like. They're small guides and they talk about, I think we have, no, I'm drawing a blank whether it's 16 or 18. I think it's 16 of them. And they talk about anxiety, self-compassion, emotional granularity, helping kids understand what they're actually feeling. And they're done. We did them, Megan Saxelby, who's a consultant with us, it was her brainchild, and they're just really well done art wise and all that. So they're very fun. And I love them. And then we also, we work with Lisa Damore sometimes, and she's drlisadamore.com. She wrote Untangled and Under Pressure. And then I signed up for this parenting summit, came across my teen health parenting summit, came across my desk because of another one of our consultants, Shantara McBride. And so I watched her the other night. It's kind of a cool, all these virtual things, you can watch them for 24 hours. And I love Shantara. She and Rosalind are writing a book together right now. She was the first person that trained me many, many years ago when they worked together. But she has a website, marvelousuniversity.com. And so she works a lot with girls as well, but she does, she just really tries to help. She's like, be marvelous. That is her whole, I'm not going to articulate it well because it's so great how she does it. She just does it with this big smile, but trying to build confidence in kids. And she really talks about how we approach them and talk to them in different ways at a young age about their bodies. She has a book called Love Your Jiggle. And she means jiggles the whole body, not just what actually jiggles, as you get a little older, but she means like your jiggle is just your body and how to love it and how to appreciate it. And so she is also wonderful. And then Donna Hicks is who she does a lot of work with dignity. We don't step on toes because she's kind of in the business world, and she's worked with companies and politics and all those things, but we work with her a lot. She's written a foreword for us in the Owning Up curriculum. She doesn't want to get involved in education, but we talk to each other a lot about dignity and how it applies. And her work is great. She has a book, I think, called Dignity and Leadership, if I'm getting that correct. But she's amazing.
Oh, this sounds good. And a lot of new things for me that I'm hearing. So I love that. I love to get these fresh ideas. So this is fantastic. Started with Queen Bees and Wannabes, and now it's moved into so much more of what we're hearing in this conversation. But thank you so much, Carey.
I feel like the SEAL the SEAL acronym, that is so helpful. And that's something that our listeners love, those rubber meets the road techniques that they can walk away with and implement. And that is something that I feel like is going to help so many counselors. So that alone, plus all these other nuggets that you threw in, this has been really, really great. And I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us.
You are welcome. It's been really fun. Like I said, I could do these conversations all day because I'm so tired of blank screens.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for having me on. It's been really fun, and I'm always excited to talk about our work because I love it. And again, when I was a counselor, it worked. I feel that's why I feel so connected and passionate about it, because I saw it in action in the classroom.
Thank you again for being with us. Guys. And we need to do it again because I know there's a whole lot more that you could talk about.
Don't get me started. I
could give her any subject. I think we could give her any subject. And she's such a great counselor. She knows. She knows.
I've learned so much. I'm going to be a better counselor tomorrow because of this conversation.
Absolutely.
Again, easier said than done. Not every day was a good day. Let's see. I'm giving you the highlights of what things that went well. So don't worry. There are plenty of days where things don't go the way you plan. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Yes. But I was saying, then you go back and repair, right? Then you go back and
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much,
guys.
Fabulous. Talk about a font.
She was a specialist on all things, I feel like.
Yeah. I just want her to be my
formerly known as relational aggression, but everything.
You say the artist formerly known as the relational aggression?
I might have.
I like that.
So there were a lot of takeaways from her. And I was taking notes while she was talking. I couldn't write fast enough, but there were lots of practical, what we call rubber meets the road, things that I feel like we can turn around and implement now.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that.
I did too. And like I said, I want her to be my school counselor. I feel like she's just a little bit of everything. She knows a little bit of everything. But
So
I enjoyed it.
I want to go back to something that you said in the intro where you talked about how you're a long haul COVID person. May I address an elephant in the room? And that is that you tested negative on COVID, and yet now you're a long haul COVID. Like now you've got the survivor ribbon and
everything.
If you were to go back to your medical records, it would show. And I mean, there really is no doubt that you had it. I know that. Your whole family tested positive and you had all the symptoms.
But let me just say, I'm one of those weird people. Like I never test positive for anything. And also, let me tell you this: I can put my hand.
Not for lack of trying. You do
not for lack of trying
for everything.
I can put my hand under the sink, and the water does not recognize me. I mean, the water won't even recognize me. Like I'll have to, a lady over here, hey, could you put your hand under here so the water will come out?
It's because you're so dainty.
That's what it is. It's like the doors will not open when I go to a grocery store. You know, like everybody else will automatically open, and I'll have to get a bigger person with the bigger girth. Please hear my heart and don't take offense to that.
That is why you hang out with me.
To come stand so the doors will actually open.
Oh, now I get it. Now I understand why you have taken me on as a friend. It's not anything but my size and stature.
That's it. No.
How
that is funny. That is funny.
I just got to thinking, I was like, wait a minute, you tested negative. Now you're like, oh, you other long haulers out there band together. And I'm like, you were negative.
You ratted me out now.
No, I'm sure you had it. All right. Well, to our faithful listeners, thank you so much for listening. And we're so sorry that we've gotten off track on our Monday release schedule, but
I thought she was going to apologize for the cow. Like, how did we get on the cows and their gas issues?
Talked about gas.
Yeah.
But no, I'm sorry that we're going to get back into the swing of things on releasing these episodes on Mondays, but it may be after testing season. And you're really a school counselor if you understand what this season actually brings. And so,
or maybe you're a real counselor if you don't have to do testing because you pulled the data and you presented said data. And they're like, that is not in your job description, but we're not there yet. So we will be testing.
How about this?
Yeah, we'll try.
We may get back on our schedule after this season, because this season brings, like with the flowers and the pollen, it brings craziness. No matter where you are, you understand what spring semester as a school counselor is. So when this season passes, we'll get back into our Monday routine. But thank you for your patience. You can follow us on Facebook. You can join our newsletter group. We send out freebies every now and then. You can follow us on Instagram. You can rate and review our podcast, because it's either going to make us better or it's going to let other people find us. Or
Laura will finally realize what's going on with her.
I'll finally try to fix some of these things. Yeah. But thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a great week.